Welcome to the Get Online podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Keogh, and today I'm joined by Paul Dunn, who's a 4-time TEDx speaker. He is a senior fellow in one of the world's leading think tanks and consults to and mentors leading-edge businesses around the world. He has built and sold businesses, and his training programs have been used by an estimated 226,000 companies around the world as he continues to push boundaries. He's been featured in Forbes Magazine alongside Sir Richard Branson in a global piece on disruptors in business. But Paul is here to talk to me today as the Chairman of B1G1, Business for Good, which is a company that's enabled more than 2,500 businesses to create over 200 million giving impacts around the world. I was lucky enough to travel with both him, Paul, and B1G1 founder Masami Sato to Kenya last year, and I had the most transformative experience. I'm thrilled to have Paul join me today. He is quite the storyteller, and I hope you enjoyed this moving, emotional, and uplifting conversation with him. Welcome to the show, Paul Dunn. Thank you for joining us today.
Welcome. It's great, bud. And I'm in a forest today, right? So it's kind of interesting, right?
Yes,
and,
I can see that.
with my background. And yes, and people go, well, hang on a second, aren't you in Singapore? I mean, that's like, vertical buildings and there's no greenery. But no, that's actually the view from my window that you are seeing. And and it's where I'm about to go when we finish having this chat today. That's where I go for a run today. So, yeah. But anyway, it's fantastic to see you because it's been way too long.
I know, it has. Well, I'm very grateful to have you here today.
And the last time was in Kenya.
It was in Kenya. We're going to get into that because that was a wonderful, wonderful trip. But before we do, why don't you tell us or tell our listeners what it means to be a business for good and what it is that B1G1 does?
Okay, can I take that in reverse order? So what it is that B1G1 does, and then so one flows to the other. So B1G1, and you'll excuse me for saying it's an extraordinary concept, but yet it's like all extraordinary concepts, it's simple. And so the idea came in 2007, and the idea was pretty simple. And it was, just imagine for the moment what a world we would be living in if every time business was done, something great happened in our world. Now, when Masami Sato, the founder, said that to me, I was mentoring her at the time. My reaction to that was, oh, yeah, that'll be good. And she said, no, clearly you don't get it. And I said, well, help me get it. And she said, well, imagine, and she said, by the way, I'm calling it at the moment in my head and my dreams that I've been having for the past week about this thing. She said, I'm calling it buy one, give one. So I said, okay, so how would that work? So she said, well, imagine you go down to the store and as in the electronics store and you buy yourself, let's say a TV, right? And I said, wait, if I go down there, what's it called again? Buy one, give one. Yes, okay. So if I go down to the store, electronics store, and I buy a TV, they're going to give me another TV. Am I understanding that correctly? And she said, no. She said, you actually do not understand. And I said, well, explain to me how it would be. And she said, well, imagine you go down to the store because why are you buying a TV? Because you want better vision, right? On your TV. So you want better vision. So how would it be, she said, if when you did that, someone who could not see got the gift of sight?
Mm.
Oh, I mean, that's a different level of I get it, right? And then how would it be if every time a cup of coffee was sold, a child in need got access to pure life-changing water, and she said that because I was drinking a coffee at the time, and then how would it be if every time someone bought your book, a tree got planted? And that was when I said to her, Masami, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life? Mm. And eventually she said yes to that. And I'm really glad she did because it literally changed my life. I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
But what's so cool now is, and that was in 2007. And so now what's so cool is that, I think in 2008, something interesting happened, which was, you'll recall that thing called the global financial crisis. You know, what if you go back before then, like about 2007, that's when, if you went to seminars and stuff like that, people would be saying to you, literally, you know, greed is good and, you know, that sort of thing, right? The Wolf of Wall Street, all of that kind of stuff. And we learned that came tumbling down like you would not believe. So we got the message, hang on a second, that doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So that was when I think businesses started what I call this push to purpose. And now, particularly with COVID, you know, it's like a vertical push, right? We're really understanding, A, we're all connected, and B, that we need to be seriously on purpose. And one way of doing that is to decide that as a business, because every business needs a North Star, right? We all need that, is to become what you and I call a business for good, a business that literally embeds in its whole way of being this whole idea that every time someone does business with us, we make sure that something great, that's what you do, right? With your million days and all of those sorts of things, right? That something great happens in our world. And from a marketing perspective, I mean, you know, they're just such a cool thing. And we often don't think about B1G1 in a marketing sense. But we used to say, like 3 years ago, we would say, and I'm sorry, this is such a long answer, but hopefully, you know, they'll get shorter as we go through. But we used to say, you know, here are all the good things, right? I mean, it's like, you know, from a classic marketing point of view, you should not think about what your product does, right? You should think about what are the outcomes, right? What are the outcomes? And you should fall in love with the outcomes rather than what it does, rather than what it is. So I remember we were at this time, we were onboarding a new team member of this very lean team that we have, and we were going through, you know, saying, here are some of the things you need to know, like, you know, in B1G1, every time a business gives 100%, 100%, we even make up the bank charges on the credit card, 100% of the giving goes right to where you choose for it to go. And we make that happen. We track every single cent of the giving. It's really hard for a project to become a project in B1G1. You know, the board rejects up to 9 out of 10. You know, it's like, it's tough, right? And so we're going through all of this stuff, right? And then someone on our team said, hang on a second, that to themselves, that sounds like we're getting focused on what we do rather than the outcome. So this person literally, who wouldn't normally be spending that much time on Zoom calls back in those days, in fact, it wasn't Zoom calls back in, oh yeah, it was, because this is like about 3 years ago that this happened.
Okay.
And yeah, we were one of the early Zoom users, which is another interesting thing. Anyway, and Sharon, it's name, and she's calling B1G1 members, and she's saying to them, how do you describe, you know, what B1G1 does? And she's got this word cloud on, you know, on her computer, and so you could see it coming out. And the word that came out was transform. Yeah, it wasn't about 100% of the giving goes. It wasn't about you can give from 1 cent. It wasn't about any of it. The word was transform, right? So Sharon said, really? That's kind of interesting. You know, what is that about? Why would you say that? And the person said, or people said, it shifts the spirit. And if you relate that back to today, how cool is that? Because let's go back a little bit more than that. Because if I'm sort of, you may remember, I think I told you the story before, where Jeff Bezos he of Amazon was asked about 2 years ago in a discussion on disruption in business. So the interviewer said, Jeff, don't you think it'd be really cool to be on first name basis with Mr. Bezos? Anyway, so he says, Jeff, you know, here we are in this age of disruption. So could I ask you, what's the marketing message, or what's the message that you give to your marketing department today, right? Yeah. And Bezos looks at him and he says, well, it's the same message that I gave them, you know, when Amazon started. Yeah. And the interviewer goes, what? Really? You've got to be kidding me, because, things have changed. So he says, so what do you mean by that? And he said, well, the big thing to remember, and this is very important, right, for all of the people listening to Get Online, but what he said was, what you do is search for that, in this age of disruption, what you do is you search for that which is constant. Now, see, that's like counterintuitive. And so the interviewer then says, well, like what? Right? And Bezos says, well, there's all sorts of things, but one of them is the need to belong, the need to belong. And what are we seeing now? We're seeing this rapid acceleration of people really getting that that's so important. It could have taken us 10 years to get to this point, right? What better way of being connected than well, first of all, getting connected to yourself from the point of view of being on purpose, getting your team connected to yourself, shifting that spirit. But what better, and making a difference in the world at the same time, and connecting with your customers or your client in this brand new way, and realizing that digitally is a profoundly beautiful and important way of doing that. It's it's just so easy to do, and you've been preaching that for like over many years.
A while now.
All of a sudden, COVID comes along.
Well, that's it. And I think I've just even just listening to everything you've just said, Paul, I think that's exactly why I chose, for example, to do all of our giving impact through B1G1, because transform was the word that you use, or a lot of other people were using. And that's exactly what it's done. I think businesses now we've always needed a bigger purpose. It goes beyond, the financial thing of running a business, or what it is that we do for our customers or our clients. Like, you get to a certain point in business that you want to make sure that you're making a bigger impact. Like, that is a drive, I think, for a lot of businesses. And I think it helps with so many different aspects. That's something I've learned, obviously, since 2017 is when I first came across you. And I obviously realized that it was, I had a lot of passion to sort of help become more sustainable business. I wanted to align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Yep. You make that very easy. I became a B1G1 member, and you pay a very minimal fee for you to vet. And I just think the level of detail that your team go into to understand the impact of the organizations that you work with is absolutely phenomenal. In terms of the work you take away from me as a business owner, amazing. And you just make the platform so easy. Everything about it is so simple. And I think you sort of touched on something there in terms of people wanting connection and wanting community in all aspects of their life, business wise, but also personally and socially. And you deliver that with B1G1 too, because I've attended many of your conferences and all of the things that you've done all around the world. I've, come out to Singapore, and as you briefly mentioned in the beginning, we traveled to Kenya together, and I actually went to Cambodia last year and met some of the organizations that's on the platform as well. And
TLC.
And you've just brought together all of these businesses from around the world that all are trying to do the same thing and all trying to make this world a better place. And I just think it's just, I want to ask you a question. I want you to tell me maybe a little bit about your background before B1G1. So how did you get to this point? So where are you you've obviously got an enormous amount of experience. You've successfully built and sold
Is that another way of saying, Paul, you're older than 40?
No. You've built and sold businesses. You've been very, very successful. So tell us, very briefly, sort of how you got to this point.
All of life is very simple. It's just a collection of moments. That's all it is, right? Well, that's what it is, not all it is. I mean, that's the amazing thing that it is. And so we all have moments in our lives. We do. And I had one in 2006. Up until that time, you're right. I got very lucky. I was born in Dover. My dad was a miner down there in a tiny little mining village. Down there, and Dad said, you're never going to go down the pit, as it was called in those days. And I never did, but all my friends, when I got to study in London, they all wanted to do, but I never went down there. But anyway, and I got very lucky. I got headhunted to be one of the first 10 in Hewlett-Packard in Australia. I then formed one of Australia's first computer companies, and then, I discovered that I maybe had something to say, and so then started speaking and creating, some very interesting, as you say, companies. But up until 2006, if you would have said to me, so what's the secret of business, Paul? You would have said that, right? I would have said, well, it's really two things. It's this. First thing is you have to, and this has got to be your focus has got to be to add extraordinary value to the people whom you are privileged to serve. That's the first thing. You got to get that right, okay? And then the second thing is very simple, and it is to have fun doing that. That was it. That was, Paul's 2 rules, if you like, right? And then I had this moment, and the moment occurred in Bangalore, and I was there for a conference, and I happened to, a friend of mine who was at this conference said, come to dinner, and he said we're going to the Taj, and I actually thought of, the Taj hotel was like, 6-star hotel.
Yeah.
And this was not, believe me, this was not the Taj.
Okay.
Tiny little, Indian thing. And I meet this guy who looks very, very young, very young relative to me. He's like about 32. And he introduced himself, and he said, I said, hi, I'm Paul Dunn. He said, hi. And gave me his name. And I said, so what brings you here? And he said, well, Alex, my friend who had brought me there, and he said, well, Alex knows the story, so let me tell you. He said, so 18 months ago, and I remember this is 2006, so 18 months ago, I had an experience, which I'll come to in a minute, he said, but 4 years before that, he said, my church, this guy was a minister, right? He was a minister in church. And he said, I was asked to go to an island off India, and we created this little community. It was 3,500 people. We have built this beautiful white fenced church and everything. And then he said, 18 months ago, everything changed. I said, oh, really, what happened? He said, well, it was actually right on Christmas time. Now, that should have given me the clue, right? And I go, oh, okay. And he said it was a Sunday. Again, should have given me the clue. And he said, we were there on a Sunday school, and all of a sudden we heard this noise, the like of which we'd never heard. And there's 12 kids in this little Sunday school. And he said, oh, and the kids were like, and he said, it'll be okay. And he said, I opened the door and I looked out. I closed it behind me so they couldn't see. And I looked out, he said, and I saw this huge wall of water that was clearly going to engulf us. And of course, he was talking about the 2004 tsunami, right? And I went, oh my God. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, we said to the kids, let's all play a game, let's all hold hands and we'll run to the high ground. And so we said, that's what we did. And we stood there, 6 kids either side, and we watched as the church was just crushed and it was washed away. And we stood there as we saw their parents washed away as well. And so there's one of those moments that I'll always remember. What I can't remember is what I said next. I can't remember that. But it was probably something like, what happened then. And he told me that they'd spent 18 months with these 12 kids trying, it took them 4 weeks to get off that island, and they've been traveling around trying to find a place to live. And 4 weeks before this meeting, someone had kind of given it to them. Anyway, let me get to the point of the story. And he said, so we've got this place to live, but now it's really interesting. He said, because, the kids, we've got to get them to school, we've got to feed them, they need textbooks, all of that. And I said, oh, okay, so how much, have you figured out how much that is? He said, well, that's what Alex has been helping us with. And he said, it's $3,500. And I said, that's per child, right? And he said, oh, no. It said, that's for all of us. Right?
Gosh, yeah.
Now, had you been there, and anyone listening to us now, had you been there, you would have done, I was just privileged to be there at that moment. And I said, without knowing how I would fix it, I said exactly what you would say, which was, It's fixed. Don't worry about how. It's fixed, right? And it took a number of weeks to fix it. And then about 5 weeks later, I get this email from him, and he's gone down to an internet cafe, and he's borrowed a camera, and he's taken 4 pictures, and he writes me a little note. Anyway, the 4 pictures, of course, I've treasured. First picture, long shot of the home where they are. Second picture, inside this one-room place with the 12 kids in a circle with food in front of them. Caption, you see, we've now got food. Next shot, same kids, different circle, and probably a different time of day. And here they are with their school books. And he says, look, they've got the school books and everything else. But the picture that changes everything, and this is the moment, is the close-up shot of the outside of this tiny little house. Remember, there was a long shot of it. And then there it is. And right across the top of it, they painted in big letters on a sort of a paper banner, Paul Dunn Home. I was like, oh. That was the moment, you know. And what happened then is what happened. This is why podcasts are so cool, right? Because what happened then is you would be aware that there's a part of brain called the reticular activation system, and what that does is, imagine you're driving down the road imagine you just go buy a new car. Let's say it's a Mercedes or something, right? And you pick it up. You never had a Mercedes before. You pick it up. Hopefully they've got it filled with fuel, and off you drive. And you're driving down the highway, and all of a sudden, you had this experience. All of a sudden, it looks like every third car coming towards you is the same as the car that you've just bought, right? Now, the cars were always there. It's just that you never saw them. Your reticular activation system kicked in. And so that happened to me. All of a sudden, after I'd had that experience, I started seeing other things that were there, but I'd never seen them.
Yeah.
And that was how, about 12 months, well, actually 8 months later, I'm in that situation that I described to you before, where Masami is, telling me that she's done this. And so that was,
if that is not a story,
life-changing.
If that's not a reason to do business, I don't know what is, right? To be in a position where you can help to solve those problems, I just think it's just amazing. And I think this is where...
And so now you get this other purpose, right? You get, the purpose is, right, you get the other purpose, which is still, the first two are the same, right? Add enormous value to the people you're privileged to serve. Have fun doing that. And be a part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
So you can really look out and create an even better world out there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just brilliant, Paul. So I think, thank you for sharing that story, because I think, for any of us that have, traveled a lot and many of us listening to this podcast.
But you've had similar stories, right? I should reverse the interview and you can tell.
No, not at all. I mean,
you've got some awesome stories.
I mean, the thing is, for any of us that have traveled quite a bit and around the world, we, come from a developed country, and you go to these other locations and you see the hardship and conditions, and if you're in a position to help, why wouldn't you, right? And as a business, these are the sorts of things that we can do to change, to embrace equality and kind of bring, equal opportunity out to everybody. And I think that's the thing that really does drive us forward in terms of what we're doing here at Brand Active. Let's talk a bit about the marketing side of it, because obviously I'm a marketing agency, right? We work with lots of businesses where we carry out their marketing for them. Seeing this huge drive towards businesses wanting to be more ethical or wanting to do something bigger than themselves, and have great, whether it's, you call it a CSR policy or social impact, or there's this sort of rise of environmental advocates and conscious consumers and these social entrepreneurs, and there's definitely a trend towards sustainability and this focus on anti-consumerism. So I think this is a moment in time where businesses are becoming more aware of that and the demand from consumer. But I think equally, there's a bit of a worry sometimes from businesses. I found this with some of the clients that we work with, which is, we're doing all this amazing stuff, but we're unsure how to share it and how to communicate that without it feeling a bit icky, or that we're greenwashing, or, you know, I think I saw something, is it BlackRock? Larry Fink, when he came out, was it earlier this year or end of 2019? Where he talked about, you know, it's just, you know, the future is sustainable investing, and, you know, we're only working with businesses that meet this criteria or whatever it was. Brilliant. Loads of people are very excited about that. That's an amazing thing that's happening. But equally, you get someone off the back of that. I think it was Warren Buffett, who loads of people respect in terms of his business accomplishments, but came out and criticized that, to say that actually that's a political move. And I think that is something that is ingrained a little bit in businesses, where we think, okay, yes, we're doing all this good stuff, but we don't want to gloat about it too much because it feels a bit off. I don't know if you've had any thoughts on that, or what a good way of speaking to our customers or clients might be, where it feels natural and feels, you know, not icky, for lack of a better word.
Not icky. No, icky is a great word, right? And not surprisingly, you know, we hear that fairly frequently. And I may tell you a story in a minute about an even more interesting circumstance about that. But here's the thing. I think that we've gone through the, you know what it used to look like. I mean, you know, we had, you know, the CSR programs, and we had, you know, we had the thing where we would see a television spectacular or something, and we would see the chief executive would get there with a big check, you know, those big checks, right? Look at this, you know, this is what we've done. And it was like this one-off thing, and, you know, it's kind of, look at us, right? We're way beyond that now. And so in B1G1, what we're able to talk about is, you know, when, again, it's when this happened. So we're able to say, well, you're able to say, you know, just by listening, when you, for example, well, let me give you a for example from me and from lots of B1G1 members around the world, which basically says every time we send an email, a child gets access to education. That's it, right? Very simple. And it's like, oh, really? You've just got that very simple thing with that very simple thing. That doesn't sound icky anymore. And it's because it's not about us. It's about the project, if you will. And so you can expand that across to all sorts of things. This time that we're in right now is, I think, you know, Z time. I mean, there's so many things that have been accelerated. I call this, by the way, our time to rise. That's what I call this now, because I think it is. And one of the things that, you know, you know, and I have images in my mind, right? Is it Captain Tom or Major Tom, you know, who's going up the, that is just amazing, right?
Yeah, it is. He's incredible.
And who could have imagined that, you know, so maybe some stuff is changing. So, because I think that where it was this whole sort of look at us kind of thing.
If we're talking about Generation Z, for example, I think that sort of demographic of people, or even millennials, are doing more research to understand what's behind the brand. So I think perhaps businesses can't get away with it in the same way they might have if it wasn't driven by real purpose or real value. You know, it's not just about writing a check or whatever it might be. It really has to be kind of bred into the business, and it really has to feel authentic, and that it's a part of the business. And that isn't a marketing ploy, I suppose. I think if it's ever done for the purpose of marketing, it's probably not the right intention, and that is where...
No, but we can smell it, right? We really can smell it. We don't need to be told greenwashing or whatever, because we can smell it, right?
Yeah.
So look at how you acted in that situation. No, you should, you know. We really should.
So it's more about how it's bred into the business, I suppose, isn't it? It's really interesting because I try to think about where we put it in the sales cycle, for example. So, you know, if I think about what we do at BrandLective, we do talk about it on our social media channels. So we talk about it openly around, you know, our giving impacts and social impact and our big vision and what we want to achieve and how we plan to achieve that and what we do. So I suppose if someone, for example, was coming to work with us and they did all their research and looked at all of that, they would see it. So it would be out there. However, I don't put it into the sales cycle. So let's say, for example, I've got a call booked in that's just talking about our product offering. I actually don't really talk about it then. I don't actually talk about it at the point of contract signing or anything like that either.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And then what does happen is, when someone's onboarded, they receive a little welcome pack. And in that welcome pack, we give them those little giving certificates, which B1G1 you very kindly make very easy to do from your platform. So then it's sort of a bit of a surprise and delight element where a business, one of our clients then is just like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that you even did this, but that's amazing. And almost just reinforces the decision-making to work with us.
And because of what you've done in that, you see, you've created a special moment, right? And it's not conditional. You're not saying, by the way, when you give us a like on Facebook, this or whatever, which is what it was done. And so, let's go back to that whole thing about belonging that we talked about with Bezos, right? Another way of saying it, that it's just connection. It's connecting. Right. It's connecting. Yeah. And so all of us here, I mean, yes, we might use the word marketing, we might use the word selling, we might use all those sorts of words, but there is one word that I would love us to start using. It's this word connecting or connection. And so when we start writing our blogs and when we start doing, the things we do, the question that we ask is, I think we should be asking is this connecting? Is this connecting? And by the way, connecting human to human, is that what it's doing? So it's not about, is this selling something? It is about, is this connecting? Is this enhancing the trust? Is this doing all of those sorts of things? And by the way, that trust thing is really important. And I haven't seen a study on this, a new study on this. I saw another one actually on Friday, a couple of days ago, where, it said that the trust in companies was always bigger than the trust in governments. But now that's changed. And that's changed. It's really significant shift, actually, because of the way some companies have been dealing with what's been happening in this last few months. Before that, I think I had shared with you once that one of the reasons that we're very, very careful about it is we know that in the UK, as for example, 7 out of 10 people, 70% of people, we never use the word charity as such, right? And that's because we know that sadly, it's so sad, but sadly, 7 out of 10 people have had either a bad experience themselves or they know someone who had one, right? So that's why we start thinking about projects. That's why every message that, and you were just talking about it, every message is in that connection space, and it's delivered at exactly the right time so that people go, you just said it, oh, that's awesome, look at that, right? It's like it's like this extra little bit of the product, right, that was there. And when you think about it from a connection perspective, there's just so many opportunities to do that. And so what you can do, in fact, let me do this one. Let me give you this little sequence. Do you remember Cyndi Lauper? Do you remember Cyndi Lauper?
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, I was born in the 80s, but yes.
Yeah. Well, you would remember that song of hers, right? That was, her. We should sort of give a prize to people listening to the podcast now. You may remember, right? The True Colors, right? That one, right? Mm-hmm. And I was meeting with some business owners the other day, and they said, this pandemic, it's really brought out the true colors. And I said, like what? And they said, well, it's really sorted out some of our team members. Like, we were amazed, as in positively amazed, at how they did things in this and the things they did. On the other hand, there were some who, and it sort of sorted it out. And so one of the things we've seen, and you've seen it in the UK as well, is that there really, I think there's these 3 levels of leadership which become really interesting in this time. One thing is that when the pandemic hit, you go into what's called, one type of leader goes into panic, like, oh my God, and they freeze. There's nothing they can do. Another leader, we call it passive leadership, and they just kind of, oh, well, I'll wait this out. The problem is when they get to the other side, they're still in exactly the same place, right? So nothing changed. I mean, the panic guy's gone, But then there's this other leader, we call them purpose-driven leader, and they're kind of rising up. Why? Because they've got this kind of North Star, this thing that's bigger than them, right? Your million days is bigger than you, right? And everything is viewed through that lens.
Yeah.
And so I started to think about that, and I started to think about, okay, so what is it that these people do? And what they do is they make sure that they're at their best, consistently at their best every day, consistently. And then you start to ask yourself, from a leadership perspective, right? Oh, so what is it that makes us, you and I, consistently at our best every day? Now, there's lots of things, but one that I came up with, and I was just thinking about it on a run, actually. And I thought, what is it that makes you? And I thought, you know what? Actually, we're all at our best when we're giving. Think about that for a minute, right? When, you help someone across the road, or, it's not just that they feel great that you've done it. You feel great that you did it, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So it's a question of, if you think about that for a minute, then you ask yourself, well, and you see the leaders, what the great leaders are doing right now is embedding that spirit, if you like, of giving, right? I'm not saying it's giving financially, that spirit of giving there. And what happens when they do that is, and it's a word we used a little while ago, but you know how in this time we're talking about, well, you pivot. And I'm not trying to make light of this time. I'm really not. And we should, give a shout out to all the people who, deliver us food in lockdown, and all the people on the front line. I mean, oh God, there's the real heroes,
it's just incredible, isn't it?
Isn't it? But so what happens is these people who do that in this time. Remember what I said before, Stacey. This is our time to rise. Why? Because everything has happened so quickly, and we know we're going to get through it. But the question is, how do we get through it? And so I think that what happens is, instead of pivoting because of leaders being consistently at their best, what actually happens is they transform. And so this is this extraordinary opportunity. Who would have thought that people running ballroom dancing classes, who could have thought that they would be able to do that online with social distance rules in place? I mean, who would have thought?
I know.
And all of a sudden, they're doing this. And then we go, oh my goodness, look at that. We can then move to subscription models. We can do that. Oh, it's so much easier now.
Yeah.
There's so much that opens up.
I agree. And I think, these moments in time happened, and, there's lots of unfortunate things that related to COVID and lockdown and everything that's happening. But there are also some really beautiful things that are coming out of that. And I think, not that I want to get into too much politics, but I definitely see, what you were talking about there in terms of leadership. I'm from New Zealand, in terms of how New Zealand government are handling things compared to where I work and live in the UK, very, very different. So I think I totally hear you on that. But I want to kind of come back to what you're talking about with connection, because I think actually that is really beautiful, what you're talking about, and that is something that we all crave. And this is an opportunity really for us to embrace that. But I think it kind of plays quite nicely into perhaps us talking a little bit about the trip we did together last year. So I was obviously very fortunate to be able to travel to Kenya with yourself and Masami, and I think there were 24 business owners, weren't there? All of us in the group.
Yeah,
and we were able to visit some of the projects that we all give to, and we got to experience, really what was happening at the grassroots level.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It was just, God, it was absolutely just a completely life-changing experience. But maybe, talk to me a little bit about a moment that you can remember from that trip that we did, and sort of why that was important, or how what kind of gets you thinking about what to do next? Because I had a couple of moments on that trip, but I'll let you kind of explain first of all what we were doing while we were there.
Well, you're right. We were visiting, schools and all sorts of, education. We were looking at how people were making amazing best of, what you and I would regard as like, oh my God, how could you possibly be doing stuff like that? We went into tiny little hospitals where the whole communities had been transformed by the stuff that these people were doing. But it's interesting you asked me that question, and everybody should know, by the way, that I have no idea where these questions are coming from, but I'm liking the questions. Right? So
just throwing you, yeah.
So, no, it's good, because for me, of course, I've been privileged enough to be able to go and lead several of these things. And so what's really interesting is, so there's the personal stuff that I see. Like I remember meeting with Consolata. Remember Consolata at the mango tree? I mean, just amazing. And she gives this little welcoming speech, and she says, well, we actually take care of 9,000 orphans. Sorry? 9,000 orphans? Yeah, and we do that without orphanages. Oh, well, and oh God, I mean, it's just, I mean,
she's amazing. I mean, yeah, and I know I've got goosebumps too. You just said that, so I think, well, for a bit of perspective for people listening, the Mango Tree, they help orphaned children. And I think it was 9,000 in a very small radius, wasn't it, Paul? Like it was quite alarming.
Oh yeah, like about like 20
kilometer radius, 9,000 orphans.
Yeah.
That it's quite upsetting. And that's due to parents and AIDS epidemic and malaria and all that sort of thing, and just conditions, and it was just quite challenging. But she's doing an amazing thing, wasn't it? It was just absolutely life-changing, being able to see what she does and how she brings the community together to help take care of these children and the opportunities that they create. You start getting into one piece of it, and you start to think, okay, so you help get these children into homes or into schools, great. And then you start to take a little bit peek a little bit deeper under the cover and kind of see, well, how does that really work? And you start to uncover the work opportunities that they create for local farmers and how that dictates, and then tree planting and supporting the community, and they're giving goats to widowed women to help create opportunity for them to be able to make an income and support the rest of their community. It very quickly becomes the spider web of like incredibleness that's just mind-blowing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like what's really, I mean, you mentioned the goats for example, and I've got to say, I love the goats, right? Because they're this great example of what we would call a circular project, So someone starts by getting a goat, right? And here's what they do. They have this agreement that the offspring, the kid, is that right? Of the goat. That's right. You have to give that kid to your neighbor. You've got to do that, right? So the giving is like enhanced around it. But the other thing for me was not just I got a lump in my throat just thinking about some of the projects. But the other thing for me is to look at what you're experiencing, and you see how all of a sudden, you kind of leverage out everything. And, so now think about it. So now here are you and I talking about it to, the thousands of people who are listening to this podcast. And that, by the way, is another reason why when we give, I told you I would tell you about a profound experience that I had with someone but I won't mention their name, but who was very deeply religious, as it turns out. And he was doing a lot of giving, but he would kind of keep it under a bushel, because apparently there is something biblical that says, you should do that. And so he was really challenged by the whole, he loved B1G1 in terms of, what was going on, but he was very challenged. And then one day he just had this thing that said, what I do in my business is I inspire people and so on and so forth. Well, you know what? I can actually inspire people through the giving to do the giving as well. Right? So all of a sudden you get this, as you said, this sort of ripple effect going out. And we're seeing that now more and more and more, because, as you said, it's just so, I hate to say the word convenient, but it is. It's so easy, right? It's easier than ever to do this now.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, as I said, to go and do Kenya, and to go with, I mean, you would have seen it because you had your sister there and mum was there as well. And, you would have seen all the experiences that they were having. And so to see that.
Exactly. You start to see that ripple effect too, because then of course, as you mentioned, it was great that I always, whenever we do these sorts of trips, we always try to take someone from the team. On this occasion, it was actually my sister who works with us as well. And then my mum was able to join too, which was fantastic. But then she takes that on and she starts getting all her friends involved. So all their friends are on our platform now, where they're, giving and birthday presents and stuff to everybody around them.
Yeah, exactly.
She's so excited about it, and you see what it does. And I just think you're right. Like, just talking about it and sharing it has this amazing ripple effect, which is just awesome. The other thing that I've sort of found from that experience too was one of my big takeaways was we were talking about connection in the community that we sort of witnessed. And I think we met a lot of women, didn't we? There was a lot of projects that support women. Even at Proactive, for us, every time we build a website, for example, we give 2 days of business training to these women in Kenya that we got to meet, which was outstanding. And to actually see what impact that makes and how it transforms their lives was just...
There it was, right in front of your eyes, right there it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're so brilliant. I know I'm not even doing it justice, but they really are. And I think one thing I took away
to describe it, right?
Yeah, you can't. But one thing I took away from that is how much they support each other and the community that they create. They work in these little co-ops, I guess, where they're sort of sharing, with if a business hasn't done that well this week, that everybody else in the community will share a little bit of financially to help that person the next week, and they pay it back. And they're just very collaborative in the way that they do things. And I kind of came away from Kenya and I was a bit like, why am I trying to do everything by myself? Like, why am I not, just collaborating more with other businesses? Like, it doesn't, like, you just saw what they were doing was just, they moved each other forward so much quicker because they were collaborating and because they were sharing and because they were helping each other and, celebrating in times of good and then supporting, by putting in the hard work or even financially supporting each other when times were tough. And I just thought, oh my God, like, what am I doing? So I've come back on this real mission of just like partnerships and collaboration. And we need to be doing this more because it is leverage, yes, but it's not in a stamp all over each other kind of way. It's in an uplifting way and in a way of raising each other up because we can share our resources or our team or our ideas or our challenges to be able to learn from. And I just think, I kind of went into it thinking I was observing the project and, how our giving was helping to support them. But the lessons that I took away from meeting with those businesswomen was just, it's transformed like the way that we do business for sure.
Unfortunately, it happened when we could actually go and see it. But we are looking at ways of VRing and ARing that whole experience, by the way, which would be really cool. But what's interesting about that lesson is, the lessons in this, one, when it hit, what we were saying, and I'm sure you were saying the same thing, is that what you need to do this time when it hit was just double down, however you do it, just double down on the relationship, and then you might actually be talking with the client or the customer and saying, I understand it's, this is really challenging. And what I want to help you with is what happens on the other side of this. I want to make sure that, we can help you do that. So just let's talk through some of the issues. And we found that when people started doing that, they would then come to the realization that actually it wasn't necessarily them that could solve that problem, but they knew someone who could. You see what I mean? So all of a sudden you started getting this kind of chain. It's these extraordinary circumstances that show us the extent to, how things all of a sudden become possible that were there right before our very eyes. In fact, I saw this thing yesterday that is just blows my mind. I got, actually yesterday, no, it was on Saturday afternoon, I got this email from a guy called Tianzu, and he runs a company called Zuora. And the subject line, now this email goes out to lots of people, right? and lots of people who might be in retail, for example. And the headline is this. Listen to this headline. COVID-19 is the best thing to happen to retail. Now, just imagine you're a retailer and you get that message. You go, what? This guy's, he's been smoking something. He's off the planet, whatever. And then you read this just brilliant article, and it comes down to this. Have a listen to this. The old way of retail has been dying for years, and COVID-19 finally pushed it off a cliff. But a more resilient retail industry is shaping up right in front of our eyes. The future of retail is already here. It's just hiding in plain sight. Now, what's really interesting is you can change the word retail and put any word in there. You can put accounting, you could put coaching, you put any word in there, and you realize that, and this is why what you do is so cool, because people can get that. Hang on a second. I wonder how we can reshape. I wonder how we can transform. What are some of the things that what are some of the tools that have already been there? Yeah. We couldn't possibly use those. And then all I'm saying, actually, when we use those things, oh my God, it changes the connection. It really does. And also we learn that it helps people belong, and we get it that people are, I think, that people are hungrier now for real connection than I don't mean real physical connection. I don't mean that. I think there's an unfortunate thing where we talk about, social distancing. I think what we should talk about is physical distancing, but social distancing is actually okay, right? If you know what I mean. I mean, it's social connection that we can do. And so through all of the great things that you're doing, you talked about the ripple effect of giving. Yeah, it's a huge ripple effect. But think about the things that you're doing so that you're creating those double things, right, in what you do through Get Online. And, and it must be really cool to be able to do that and see the impact you're having on the people that you're privileged to serve as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to see, some businesses are thriving more so than before, because all of a sudden they've I'm sick of hearing the word pivot, but they have transferred their business sort of online or embraced digital on a totally new level. And to see what they're able to do. And, this isn't about, I've had this conversation all the time, Paul, which is digital is not about abandoning traditional techniques. It's not about not having a storefront anymore, or not having a face-to-face meeting. That's not what it's about. It's about utilizing technology to reach a greater audience, no matter what the circumstances are. Yeah. And I think this is the thing, right? You hear this with coaching businesses and education businesses, where now that people don't have to come to them to get to a city to do this, you can get into the home of anybody in a tiny little village up in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's just, the possibilities become really exciting. So yeah, I think.
You do. You start to see things, and it is seriously amazing. It really is. And again, we don't need to. We're not making light of some of the challenges. I mean,
no, absolutely not.
But at the same time, when your head changes, you're going to see. That's why I like that piece. It's hiding in plain sight. It's really hiding in plain sight. By the way, it was so funny when you said the word pivot, and you went, so many people are talking about pivot. I was saying the other day that here's the three big phrases that people are using these days. One is pivot, and don't ever use that again. The other one is unprecedented. Don't ever use that again. And then the third one was you're on mute.
Yes. So true. Like, in terms of, you're absolutely right. That's actually good. I've been saying the first two, but the third one's a brilliant joke. I need to start bringing that into things I'm talking about, because that is a very true statement. I like it. I like it a lot. Oh, brilliant. I've loved this, Paul. Thank you very much for sharing all of these stories. I think just to kind of wrap things up, I would love to hear, you talk a lot every time I've seen you on stage, or I see this across, your social media channels, about being an advocate for micro impacts. And, we believe in the stunning power of small. So I guess my sort of final question is, what sort of micro action or impact could our listeners take today or tomorrow to make a real change in their businesses to move towards being more good?
Well, and this wraps back into business for good, and just go back to that story that we talked about. This is all about us, and we're all leaders, really. Being consistently at our best, and that we're all at our best when we're giving. And it's very important to understand that that doesn't mean you put your hand in your pocket and you give money. That doesn't mean that. Like here, I'm looking out my window now, and it just happens that it's a beautiful look, and but there happens to be a bus stop down there, right? And the buses are still running. And forever, I can't remember a time when I haven't done this, but I'm sure it was, it just feels like it's part of me now. And when the bus stops, and then I get on the bus, because the transport system here in Singapore is just amazing. Get on the bus. I will always, it embarrasses my family sometimes. I will always say to the bus driver, "Thank you for stopping." I always say it. And they go, "Oh, yeah, oh," all of a sudden, you get it back. Or for the taxi driver, thank you so much for coming by. And they say, "Oh, but sir, that's my job," and yeah, but I'm just so glad you're doing that. And here's the point, right? The point is that we talked before about moments, right? And it's all about a collection of moments, and we're not necessarily victims of those moments. We're actually creating those moments. When we have that giving spirit, then the reality is that, by the way, what we tend to think about, just think about this, when we talk about Kenya, right? We're talking about Kenya before. And it's possible for us to think, oh, here are we, giving. And so those people are the beneficiaries of our largesse, right? It's possible to think about that. But if you carefully listen to every single word of this. By the way, it's been lovely hanging out with you. If you listen to every word on here, what you suddenly get is the beneficiary. Yes, someone got water that didn't get it before, and they don't have to walk 20 kilometers, and they can go to school because there's water there. I just teared up when I thought about that, actually. But anyway. But what you get is, and so it's possible to think there's the beneficiary, and of course they're the beneficiary, of course they are. But what we forget is that we're the beneficiary too. We are the beneficiary of that, of that. Like when the bus driver lights up and says, "Oh, that impacts me," that feel, right? So exactly, yeah, and so. And, fortunately now there are universities that study all of that sort of thing. And, I think in the UK, there's a Society of Happiness and all that kind of stuff. And they have all of these numbers now which talk about, how great it is to be able to do that and what a difference it makes to our lives and so on and so forth. And it does. And, I would hope that one of the things that comes out of this, I'm not sure whether you were there, but I ran an event, as in a online event, and we were able to put people in on Zoom in these rooms, where we just had three people together, rooms. And the breakout rooms. I call them breakthrough rooms.
Breakthrough rooms, yes, yep.
Yeah, and we put them in this room and said, okay, you've got 3 minutes, and all we want you to do is just talk about the best experience or the experiences that you've seen in the last few weeks of humanity at its best. Just share, what are those things, right? And we're not listening to it. It's just these 3 people there, and there's another 3 people in another room here, kind of thing, electronically. And then, they came back out, and so now everybody's like there together, and we say, okay, would you just do this? Would you just jump up on the chat, and would you just put in one word the word that came up for you when you were either sharing or listening? And if you look at it, and they put them in, And I know exactly what they're going to say because I do it a few times. They're going to say connected, inspired, authentic. That's what they're going to say in that kind of order, connected, inspiring. So then what I do, which is so cool, or at least I think, I shouldn't say it's so cool, but I say, okay, everybody, what you're going to see is the eighth wonder of the world, which is Paul Dunn being silent for 30 seconds. and here's what we're going to do what I'm doing. Just go in the chat and go back to the time on that chat box when we started putting in the words that we felt, in one word sequences. Just let's go back to it. Oh, here it was. Here it is. Just go back there now. Just go now. And they all go back there. I said, okay, now I'm going to keep quiet. And I want you to scroll down through all of those words. And I want you to read and take in every single one of those words. You've got 30 seconds. And so we're quiet for 30 seconds and they're reading, connected, inspired, all of those things, right? And then you just, because we don't stop enough, right? Sometimes do we? And then you say, just imagine that experience that we just created that, right? Just imagine that could be our experience for the rest of this time. Just imagine that. Yeah. And I think, again, it comes back to us being able to create those moments and recognizing that, we're all at our very best when we're giving. And if we can go through our day, you asked, what was the one power of small thing? I used to have a sign on my desk that says, just as I got the answer, I forgot the question. But in this particular case, I remembered the question, which was, what's those power of small things? And it's just simply that. It is simply that. Just you're realizing that there are moments and that we're not victims in those moments. We can create those moments. And every single one of us can create even more by understanding that, as Stacey has said, it's not just that one moment. That one moment then ripples, and the bus driver probably goes home and says, it's crazy, I've stopped outside this place today. This guy came in and said, thank you for stopping. You just don't know when those things are going to happen, but they do. And then we can just live and be amazed and by, all of the opportunities we have to make a difference whilst we're here, to leave a legacy that is not one of consumption, but one of contribution, to live that legacy that we're going to create. I mean, we've got no choice, right? The legacy is going to be there, but we have got a choice as to what it is. And, it's not just a matter of going, oh, well, I'm going to kick the bucket and, 20 years or something. But there's a lot of days between now and those 20 years. So I better make sure that I'm living my legacy right now. Yeah. And then the other thing that is really cool, that through things like this podcast, right? And thank you for, inviting me to be on it, is we can leverage that. And then that gets leveraged and leveraged and leveraged. So, Ms. Cleo, you are doing great things.
Thank you.
I've had a ball being with you. So thank you.
I mean, living a legacy of contribution rather than consumption is a beautiful way to be thinking about how to make impact. So thank you very much for sharing that and all of the stories and education and knowledge that you've shared with us here today. I really, really do appreciate it. You're doing absolutely amazing things with what you do. And I'm so grateful to be able to be part of your community and to be able to share that with our community and our listeners here today. So thank you so much for being here.
Stacey, we are so glad you're here. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining the episode today. I hope you took a lot away from this. I know Paul and I know each other so well, and we had lots of emotional conversations and stories to share. And I feel like we get a little bit carried away on things sometimes. So hopefully there's some really tangible things that you could take away. But I'm here to share with you the 3 top attention grabbers from this episode. So attention grabber number 1, be a purpose-driven leader. Be part of something bigger. So we're all best when we're giving. I like that Paul said that. I totally resonate with it. I think we can all agree that when we give to those around us, we are better people. So how can you become a purpose-driven leader in your business? I love that. Attention grabber number 2, ethical marketing. Surprise and delight your customers. Create a really special moment for your customers rather than using your social impact as a sales tactic. Allow it to be a really lovely surprise for your customers upon completion of a sale so that you're actually building real connection. That was a thread that ran through this entire episode, how to build connections. I thought that was really, really great advice. And attention grabber number 3, leverage. Look for opportunities to collaborate and create a ripple effect. So just like the goats we were discussing, we met with these communities that were often given a goat. And part of the rules of that was you receive a goat, and that's to help with providing income opportunities. So the woman can milk the goat, make cheese, and sell that at the local market. They can then take that goat and pay to breed it with somebody else in the village who has a male goat. The offspring of that goat, it's mandatory that they actually give the first kid to a neighbor. So that neighbor can then raise that goat and create her own ways of building a business and creating income opportunities. So it's not just about supporting this one woman who received the initial goat. They were actually uplifting this entire community. And that form of leverage, I just found it was such a beautiful experience while we're there in Kenya. And I think a lot about that in our own businesses. So as many of you will know, I started speaking at events recently about our 1 Million Days initiative, which we actually launched back in 2017. And by doing that, we're actually creating more leverage. So more and more of my clients and business contacts, they also want to build social impact into their businesses. So I'm often thinking about leverage and how when we share and we talk and we collaborate with others around us, how much more of a ripple effect that can change. Just thinking about how being a purpose-driven business makes an impact on my team, for example. The connection they then feel to our business is phenomenal. And then they go on to do things too. So team members of mine have shared how they have also become B1G1 members and have given birth, when a family member has a birthday, that they give a B1G1 impact to a family member to celebrate their birthday. I just think it's amazing how much leverage can be created. So I hope you really enjoyed the episode. I thought it was wonderful. I loved catching up with Paul. If you were interested in becoming a B1G1 member, we would love you to get involved. Please do direct message me. Or if you'd like to visit the B1G1 website, I can give you a giving code, which is giving103. So in capital letters, the word giving 103. And if you join B1G1 using that giving code, you will actually receive a little credit, a little gift, which enables you to start making your giving impact right from day one. So I would love to see you as one of our partners at B1G1. Please do consider joining. And if you do have any feedback or questions about this episode, I would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.